Alright, so let's continue with Aristotle. We were talking in my last video about purpose, causation, and purpose. So for Aristotle, the real thing is to find out what is the ultimate purpose, or the ultimate goal, the ultimate desire of human beings, because unless we understand this ultimate goal or purpose, we can't really decide then how the best way to achieve it. So Aristotle outlines 3 points that he thinks have to be fulfilled in order for some purpose to be ultimate. And he said, first of all, an ultimate goal has to be self-sufficient. In other words, once you have it, it's good just by itself. You don't need other things along with it. It's a good thing to have in and of itself, so it's self-sufficient. Secondly, it has to be a final goal. In other words, something that you want for its own sake, not as a stepping stone to something else. And thirdly, this ultimate goal or purpose has to be attainable. It can't be something which is just a figment of your imagination. It has to be something which is real and accessible. So when Aristotle looked around at all the things that people desired, food, clothing, money, whatever, he felt that these things, none of these things by themselves were ultimate, because if you go to work to get money. Why do you want money? You want money to buy things. You want to buy a house. Why do you want a house? Well, so that you can raise your family, or you can buy other stuff to put in your house. Each of these things leads to some other desire. And so ultimately for Aristotle, the one goal which seemed to fulfill all these 3 stipulations was human happiness. If human beings can find happiness, happiness by itself is self-sufficient. If you're happy, you don't need something else. Once you've got happiness, it's what you want. You've got it. And secondly, it's a final goal. So it's self-sufficient and it's final. You don't become happy in order to get something else, because happiness is the goal. And thirdly, it's attainable, or ought to be attainable. So these 3 things, self-sufficient, final, and attainable, these 3 stipulations apply only to the human desire for happiness, according to Aristotle. Now, of course, unlike Plato, who felt that people could be happy by contemplating forms, like the good form of justice, and that we would be happy by contemplating these forms and then living accordingly, Aristotle said, no, it's not that simple. We have to look at real people in real situations. And so Aristotle would admit that, yes, you need a certain amount of money and comfort. You need to be able to take care of yourself in order to achieve the things that will bring you happiness. If you're starving, if you're really sick, that's not going to help you to be happy. So Aristotle was more practical than Plato in terms of these things. And as we'll see as we get on, Aristotle was also more practical in another way, which was that Plato felt that if you understood the right thing, Socrates also said this, if you understood good and bad, right and wrong, you would automatically do the right thing, and you would automatically then be happy by doing the right thing. Aristotle says, no, people need to make choices, and in order to make these choices, you need to develop certain habits or virtues which will allow you to make the correct choices. Plato felt that virtues were something that came about as a result of this contemplation. It was something that in some places Socrates even argues they can't be learned. They come about as a result of intense contemplation, philosophical contemplation, but once you've contemplated enough, you will know the good and you will do the good. Aristotle takes, again, the practical turn and says, no, people need to understand, and if necessary, they need to be taught, virtuous habits. So this is very important for Aristotle, this idea, at least when it comes to moral virtues, which I'll talk about in a minute. the main point I'm trying to get here is that both Plato and Aristotle felt that human happiness was the goal of life, but Plato felt that happiness could be achieved through justice. In fact, justice was more the goal, and happiness was the byproduct of a just life. Aristotle says, no, happiness is the goal, and you need to develop these virtues to attain the just life, or the happy life. But the virtues are the means to the end. So, again, Aristotle argues in favor of happiness being the chief end of man, of human beings, and it fulfills these three requirements. And so the question is then, how do we achieve this end? What is it that we need to do to achieve this end? And in order to understand that, we need to understand how Aristotle understood the human soul. Now, if you remember Plato divided the soul into three parts: the rational part, the spirit or heart or passion, and also the appetite. Aristotle divides the soul into three parts, but differently. He says our basic part of our soul is basically vegetative or vegetable. It's similar to the vegetable world. In other words, our body grows and develops pretty much by itself without any kind of conscious control. As long as you're eating and drinking and breathing, your body will take care of itself. And so your body grows and does everything it needs to do to, even if you're hurt, if you're scratched, your body heals itself without conscious control. So he says this part of the human being, of the body and soul, is similar to the vegetable world because it takes place totally without rational control. Then above the vegetative or vegetable part of the human soul or psyche is the animal level, the level of desires. And this is similar to the vegetative part in the sense that it is sometimes irrational. We have desires that snap up and we just feel really compelled to do them, and they don't arise from conscious desire. Our desire for food or drink or even sex or whatever, these sorts of things are very much non-rational. So the vegetative part, and to some degree the animal part of our soul, to a large degree, is irrational. However, as human beings, Aristotle says we have a certain responsibility to control our desires. Otherwise, we will simply be nothing more than animals. So, on another level, the animal sorts of desires that people have are subject to rational control. So they may arise from an irrational, non-rational part of the soul, but they are nevertheless to be controlled by the rational part. And finally, there's the rational part of the soul, which controls the animal desires, but also then seeks for higher types of learning and education and higher types of gratification. And so these three parts are very important, and it's very important to understand that the rational element of our soul controls not only the animal desires, but also higher sort of contemplative aspects of the human psyche. And in this way, Aristotle ends up sounding a little bit more like Plato.